Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our special guest today, Mark Howard, who is a longtime TV and radio personality in the Nashville area. He is going to talk Vanderbilt and all the other sports he has covered through the years. I think you're really in for a treat with this episode today. Our news presented by Sutherland & Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in an accident, call Taylor or Russell at 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Well, it's a moment we've been waiting for. Kickoff of the football season happens on Saturday night. That'll be 6:30 Central in College Station, Vanderbilt and Texas A&M. You can catch that game live on the SEC Network. Mark Howard appears on the guest line presented by Boll & Branch, started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I had no clue how comfortable sheets could be until I got Boll & Branch sheets. They are fair trade certified, meaning they are made under safe conditions by men and women treated and paid fairly. Try them free for a month. You can return them, but you won't want to. Once you get the sheets, try the mattress. That was voted the best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That's spelled B-O-L-L. Enter the promo code Vandy and get $50 off your first set of sheets. The Vandy Sports Podcast is presented by Jody Jones, DDS, trusted for his creative design and committed to both the function and aesthetics of your smile. Jody Jones provides a range of sought-after general and cosmetic dentistry services at his practice in Nashville. Jody has earned the title of #1 in Nashville for cosmetic dentistry and provides a unique environment for patients who want his famous Hollywood smile or other services. Patients enjoy getting services from Dr. Jones and his attentive team in a spa-like atmosphere. Dr. Jones has worked with many athletes, movie stars, and celebrities over the years and is dedicated to providing first-rate service to all of his patients. Jody never compromises quality, so patients can be confident they will always receive the highest level of care. Special thanks to Jody for being the title sponsor of this season. Mark Howard joins me. If you were listening to this podcast, you have almost certainly heard or seen Mark in some form or fashion. He was on talk radio in this town for, I'm guessing, about 20 years. He's been on Channel 5. He's been the Predators TV guy. I don't know that anybody in the history of Nashville sports talk media actually has logged more miles in terms of doing the job that you have done. Mark, it's a pleasure to have you on, something I should have done a long time ago but didn't really think about because you've always been so busy. But I hope you are doing well, and thank you for joining us today.
It was a long time. Happy to do it.
Well, let's get to the question I think a lot of people want to know first. How are things with you? I know that it's been a brutal summer for sports media. Just catch people up on how you're doing, because I know people miss hearing you on the radio every day, not the least of which is me.
Well, this is definitely an unusual time in my career and my life. I have not been totally unemployed since 1983. But yeah, these are different times. How am I doing? I'm fine. Nobody has to worry about that. I've got a great family. I'm very lucky, and I'm keeping busy. But I'm, contemplating what I'm going to do next, and we'll see what happens.
Has there ever been a worse time to be in sports media than right now?
There's probably, and you and I have discussed this a little bit. It is a tough time because most media entities want to do it younger, cheaper, and there's nothing wrong with that because it does give people, opportunities. But this is a hard business to grow old in. And believe me, there are a lot of people who have survived it and who have thrived even more than survived. But there are so many precarious situations you get into as time goes on. And the COVID-19 thing, I don't think any of us could have anticipated the aftershocks when we left the studio, the Cumulus studio, in mid-March. I mean, I never dreamed that I'd never go back there.
I've always looked at sports media. I thought there's two great ways to make it. One is just to be outstanding at what you do. The other is to be a real specialist in something. As long as the market for the second isn't just so small, which I know a little something about. But I just think that all the preconceptions I've had about what it takes to make it in sports media have been completely shattered this year, especially after what happened with you and Kevin Ingram.
Well, and Chris, there are a lot of things that have happened, just within radio and even television, from what I've gathered, talking to my friends, in that business in this town. And that is the young demographic has disappeared from radio. And everybody wants it because that's the sexy demographic. But a few years ago, we had the biggest share of it on the Zone. And now it is virtually gone. And that means that, young people in the 25 to 44 or the 25 to 54, however you want to stretch it, are either listening to podcasts, they are consuming their sports listening in non-traditional ways, in new ways that we wouldn't even have thought of a few years ago. So there's that. We also live in a hyper-politicized society, and it bleeds into radio. There's no question about that, too, that you have got to walk that line. So there are so many things that segment and divide your audience that, a lot of times you wake up and that number's a lot smaller, than it was a few years ago.
Well, and on top of that, before COVID hit, and I've known this for a while and you have too, the business of sports talk radio doesn't get a whole lot more cutthroat and brutal than I've seen it in Nashville the last half dozen years or so.
Yeah, but you know what? The truth is, Chris, that doesn't make Nashville any different than the other markets in the country. It was sort of unusual there for a while. And the truth of the matter is, I mean, Cumulus, the Zone, has a huge advantage in terms of signal and everything else. And there are other radio stations, good radio stations, that, have a disadvantage in terms of signal and everything else. So usually in a big market, you've got 2 or 3 radio stations that are fighting on an even keel. And that doesn't necessarily happen here.
Yeah, 104.5 just got to be so big. I don't know how anybody else has really competed with that station.
Well, apparently not well enough for me, but whatever the case, no, I know what you're saying. But times change, I'm telling you. The numbers change, and you can't just assume that the Zone is going to win all the time now. It's a different deal. People listen to other stations for other reasons, and you've got to give them a reason to come listen to you. And there is definitely a variety of opinion on how to do a radio show, not only in this town, but, of course, around the country.
Well, the other thing that has made it tough in this market that I have gathered from talking to people, especially at one particular station in this town, is you've got some franchises and maybe a school or two out there that are very, very sensitive to criticism. And I think that has very much directed a lot of sports coverage in this town.
Specifically?
Well, the Predators would be one, maybe the Titans to some degree, but the Predators in particular, I think their ears have been burning a lot the last year or two.
Oh, no question. No question. And, 102.5, that's their deal. I mean, that's their bread and butter. And they do it better than anybody. They do a great job of getting guests on there. If you are a Predators fan, in terms of, deep, hockey analysis and information, I would say those guys do the best job. I mean, they just do. Willie's on there, and that's a huge thing. But they load their lineup up with Predators people and hockey analysts, and I think they should. And I think they do a really good job. At the Zone, they had, of course, when I was there, and they obviously still do, have the Titans and the Vols. And those are two huge franchises. So, yeah, you're going to, typically serve viewers who listen to those two teams probably as well or better because they're on your air. But, that does dictate it. I mean, there's no question about it.
Before I get into some Vandy-specific things and then dive into the mailbag, what is your take on the state of the Predators and the Titans right now?
The Titans, and in the NFL, it's W-Mills. It hasn't been pretty. The rush defense hasn't been good. They haven't done a very good job of getting to the quarterback. County is out there for a lot of snaps, but we haven't seen the sack numbers. But he's played. We haven't seen Vicky yet. Gostkowski was an absolute train wreck in week 1. He was week 2. But I'll tell you what, Ryan Tannehill has been terrific. Teams have tried to shut down, Derrick Henry, but Tannehill has been outstanding. And the thing I like the most about him, he is spreading it around. You're seeing him. You see him get Adam Humphries, more involved. He's been a really good chain mover. Jonnu Smith continues to develop and blossom, into one of the better tight ends in the league. But we're going to find out in the next 3 weeks, really, with the Titans. I think this is a tough matchup. Tough time to go to Minnesota where they're 0-2, and they've been vulnerable against the rush. And the one thing the Vikings can do is run the football. So there's no question about that. As far as the Predators, I think they've reached a critical juncture. I think they understand that they've got to change the DNA of this team. I think that David Poile is going to think long and hard about what he's going to do in free agency. And that might not be what everybody thinks. Everybody's screaming for Taylor Hall. I don't see that happening. And I could be completely wrong. I think they need to get a couple of mid to low level free agents that'll change the personality of this team. They're not tough enough. There are just a lot of things they need to do to get better offensively. They still have a lot of great pieces. I mean, you got the Norris Trophy winner in Roman Yossi. Ryan Ellis compliments him awfully well. But what do? I mean, do you trade Matthias Ekholm because you've got to start thinking about how many defensemen are you going to protect in the expansion draft? That's going to be an important consideration. So you not only have to think about this year, you might have to think a little bit about next year. But I think David, has to make some essential moves to sort of change the personality and identity of this team. This team was so big on identity for so many years. And the last couple of years, that's gotten away from them.
Let's switch to Vandy. And before I go more into the present of where the programs are, I want to ask you about the radio contract, because once upon a time, Vanderbilt was in a great spot. It had the contract with you guys. You've been the biggest game in town for a while. What can you tell me about what happened with that?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, we had the chance to get the balls, and it's no contest in terms of popularity and cachet and everything else. It was nothing against Vanderbilt, but Vandy was going to get pushed aside if you had a chance to go out and get Tennessee, and I think that you'd be committing professional malpractice if you didn't try to take advantage of that, and that's exactly what we did. We felt like at the time, with the Titans involved, we had the two most valuable properties, in the market. The Predators are really good, for a lot of reasons. But, Tennessee is multi-generational. I mean, it's just, it's part of the DNA of really, and really almost a no-brainer.
Let's talk Vandy for a minute. You were here once upon a time where Vanderbilt basketball was probably the biggest game in town. That's not even a fair comparison anymore with pro sports, but it's been alarming at how quickly, I don't know that I want to say they've become irrelevant, because I'll let you make that judgment, because you stand with as good a 30,000-foot view of the sports scene here in Nashville as anybody. But I noticed, and I don't say this to take an issue with it, but I think last year I was on maybe once or twice during football season. That used to be kind of a weekly thing with you guys. And again, I know it's not personal. I know that you've got to talk about what interests your audience, but I think that they are becoming, I don't know if irrelevant is the fair way to put it. I'll let you describe it how you see fit, but the lack of interest in those programs, while understandable, is gotten alarming. And I just think that fan base is shrinking so quickly. It's almost beyond comprehension.
Well, Chris, I think some of it goes back to, and I don't want to speak ill of the dead, because I really had an enormous amount of respect for David Williams and what he did there. And in a lot of ways, as you know, he was a game changer culturally and just in terms of his coaching hires. I mean, David did a really good job of bringing coaches in, did a good job of keeping coaches, especially Tim Corbin. But David's thing was not marketing. And I think Vanderbilt's marketing approach is an embarrassment. They have to understand, I just think that they've always taken on the attitude that we're Vanderbilt, you're going to come see us. They can't do that. I mean, however you feel about James Franklin, when he was at Vanderbilt, he was beating the drum. He was calling in on our show. He was everywhere. He had people wearing Vanderbilt swag in a way that we've never seen before or since. And obviously the performance of the team has a lot to do with that. But I thought it was amusing, and I say this with peace and love, because I really want Vanderbilt to do well. I do. I think it'd be great for the city. And I remember when Franklin was here, and even Bobby Johnson, towards the end when he took him to a bowl game, and the excitement that reverberated through the city when they were filling that place up for the Auburn game, when Musburger came here. I mean, all of that is possible. But, the other problem is, with Vanderbilt, again, poor marketing plan. And now look at Vanderbilt. When they announced that Vanderbilt would be playing in front of no fans, it's like the old joke about Calvin Coolidge when he died. How could you tell? I mean, how would it feel differently for this football team to have no fans come see them, as opposed to some of the, some of the pitiful crowds that have turned out the last few years. So I think some of it starts obviously with marketing, but you got to bring players in. You've got to have competitive football teams. And I think with Derrick Mason, as much as I like him, I think they're getting diminishing returns.
Well, and with marketing, man, they just killed the golden cow with what they did with the media relations stuff. And by the way, I say media relations, it was way more than that. They did a lot of stuff over there. And baseball is the one thing that had a brand over there. And I do not know how they could have possibly done anything more to gut that brand, absent firing Tim Corbin, than what they did with media relations.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's puzzling, especially with the position that they're in. And, you just think about this city now in terms of the competition Vanderbilt has to face. It's no longer just the Titans and the Predators. You've got the soccer team. You've got, other entities, you've got people trying to bring Major League Baseball in. I don't know, that's a whole different deal. But Vanderbilt has got a lot more competition now. There's a time, and they do a lot of great talking, but I don't see a lot of action. I see them contracting rather than expanding, and you look at the other teams around the SEC, and they're doing the opposite.
Yeah, I am just really fearful for the whole program over there. I fear that they will, if it had to be one or the other, I feel like they would do something to kill baseball, maybe not intentionally, but just through stupidity. Then they will do something to bring the rest of the programs back to where they need to be. That's just how little faith I have in their leadership right now. Maybe the new president will prove me wrong, but I don't know, Mark. I don't know how much you talk to people over there or are plugged in these days, but there's just a weird vibe over there. It's almost dark. I don't know how to put my finger on it. There seems to be a lot of fear. When I try to get anything out of Alan George, who is their media relations head, and I like Alan, none of this is critical of him, you almost get the sense that you're dealing with North Korea. There's just something really strange in the water over there.
You know what, Chris? If they blew baseball up, it would be a colossally bad move, if that's a word, colossal. Be a colossal bad move for so many different reasons. I know, everybody knows. If there's one sport at Vanderbilt that everybody in town roots for, and I'm talking about everybody, it's different with other sports and other teams, but Vanderbilt baseball has an incredible following in this town. You look at the ratings, when they're in the playoffs and the College World Series, and it's just unbelievable. And Tim Corbin, is a force of nature. So if they're thinking in terms of that's just absolutely insane. But you're right. I don't know what they're thinking. I don't understand why they don't give the football program more help. It's hard to explain how little they've done with that stadium as opposed to what everybody else has done. It just boggles the mind. The way that they have hamstrung the fundraising. It just seems like it's all set up for failure at Vanderbilt. And to me, the only way this is going to change is if they finally decide, after Derrick Mason, I'm sorry to say, the next person they bring in, will be, a dynamic enough football coach to maybe prompt change. But I don't know if Vanderbilt will do that.
Well, I think what makes me suspicious is just the way they handle everything. They are really more in favor of obstructing information and hiding behind private school and what. Like, I think I would feel better if they were more transparent and out there and at least trying to promote things about the future of things. But there's just this bizarre thing where they don't want to comment or talk about anything ever, and it just makes me more suspicious than it does hopeful.
Well, Candace Lee says all the right things, but I want to see her do something. And then, and I am sure, she's a very smart person. She learned at the feet of David Williams. She has great credentials, but I don't know if they're going to allow her to do what she wants. And you're right. It's frustrating. It's crazy what goes on there. It really is like the Kremlin used to be, where, you've got these, you've got these factions, at work, behind closed doors that are cannibalizing, the most important commodities of the institution. And that's what it seems like is happening, with the football program. I'm not sure what we're going to see in basketball. The only thing I can tell you is baseball will be good.
Here's the thing that really concerns me for them, and this isn't going to happen, but just hypothetically speaking. Let's say that in football, They shocked the world. They finished 6-4 this year, beat Tennessee. Give people something beyond their wildest dreams to be excited about. And let's say in basketball they go out, they shock everybody, they make the NCAA tournament, they're exciting and fun to watch again. Neither of those are going to happen. But if they did, the question I keep asking myself is, what do the crowds look like for the following year? Because I think the fan base has sunk to such a critical mass, not to mention the mess that's their promotions and marketing. I shouldn't say it's a mess. They just don't try and don't put any resources into it. But my wonder is, like, let's say they got this back very unexpectedly and in a way that was respectable. I question how many people would be there to show up for any of it.
Absolutely. The other part of this is, if you're a Vanderbilt fan, you look, they're going to be an underdog in every game they play in this year. We know that. It could be 0-10. It might be 1-9. It doesn't matter, because it looks right now like Derrick's going to come back next year. And you're going to once again have a fan base that is totally apathetic about its football coach and its program. And that's sad. I always say apathy is worse than anger, because apathy means you're not showing up. And I agree with you. You're going to see that, in the crowds, even when they come back. And I think that Vanderbilt's needs a reality check. I mean, they have got to think about, do they want to at least try to be competitive? They have been through the years. They've managed to do that. But, Vanderbilt's got to figure out what it has to do, to once again, get to the point where you start the season at least hoping that you have a chance, to get into a bowl game.
Well, and again, I go back to the whole bizarre thing with media and relations and all those things. They're not going to have any fans in the stands in October. I sent Alan George a message on request asking, will Candace reconsider having people in the stands for October? I got basically we refer you back to our previous statement that you always get when you deal with them, which I'm not sure what that meant, but apparently that's a no. It's just so bizarre because they're not going to have fans in the stands. I don't think that they really wanted to play football. I think they would have been perfectly happy if the league didn't play football, but I don't think they were going to act out on their own. And there's been some weird stuff going on. I still don't have a credential approved for this year. I don't think I'm the only one. I will sit on some other stories that I've exchanged with local media lately, but it's almost like they want everybody to forget that there is a season. Media, fans, everybody.
That because their games are on television, but I know what you're saying. I think this whole obfuscation thing is ridiculous and just a waste of time. I don't understand what the mission is. If they don't want to be in the SEC, then get out of the SEC. It'll hurt momentarily, but in the long run, maybe that would be serving the best interest of the university. They love the checks when they come in. We know that, but they don't want to do what they have to do to be a competitive member of the SEC. It doesn't seem like, and now I don't know what they're doing. I understand that there are budgetary issues now because of COVID-19. It's hit everybody, and I understand if Vanderbilt at least temporarily, lays people off or furloughs people or whatever, that would make them no different than a lot of other, schools around the country. But you're right. This has more of a sense of this is what their game plan is, more than this is a byproduct of what's going on, with COVID-19.
Yeah, the media relations thing to me, I still don't know anyone who has an answer on that, because on one hand, like if they had just gone out and gutted the whole thing and like hired interns or something, it would be stupid, but I would sort of understand it. But like they go and they take Andrew Pate, who was as good a media relations director in anything as anybody had anywhere, and they replace him with the guy from Duke, who's pretty good, by the way. they've got the same guy running men's and women's media relations, so they've sort of replaced the men's guy for basketball. And Eric Dolan, who's a good dude too, by the way. They've hired somebody in Sarah Fetters for football who's been good to deal with so far. It's like, I don't get what they were trying to do, because it's like they just traded one guy for another. They've got, again, they've lessened the staff. They've gutted baseball. Like, if they just hired people who were 22 and could be molded to whatever it is they're trying to do, as stupid and short-sighted as that would have been, it would have made sense. But for them to kind of split the middle and not hire people there and go get, I guess, equivalent replaces other places without those people having institutional knowledge, it almost reads to me like they did something, they didn't think about it, it got out in the media, and there was a terrible narrative, and so they just scrambled to make the best of it at that point. But God help anybody if they know what they were doing when they hatched that thing out a couple of months ago.
Well, I do know this. The day after it happened, we had Tim Corbin on the show, and I was really surprised at how outspoken Corbin was about the whole thing, because he understands the importance of an identity on social media. And that was one of the things that he felt like he might be losing. And that hurts you in recruiting. It hurts you in a lot of different places. And guys like Corbin really understand, Corbin, as always, 2 or 3 moves ahead of everybody, understands the greater implications of doing something like that. Something probably that the powers that be, didn't occur to them when they decided to do this whole thing.
Shall we dip into the mailbag? All right, our mailbag is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan Josh Minton, an independent insurance agent operating out of Brentwood who can take care of all your insurance needs. Call him today at 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Twitter at Joshua Minton HQ or Facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. Josh is my insurance agent. Give him a try. Tell him you heard about him on our podcast. Matthew 00 says, what do you need to see Saturday to think Vanderbilt football is headed in the right direction?
Oh, man. Great question. I happen to think that Vanderbilt, to me, the one advantage they're going to have going down there, aside from the fact they're not bringing the radio team, is that Texas A&M has Alabama next week. So even though I know that A&M will be raring to go, and Kellen Mond, is obviously going to be a force and all that, I want to see something out of the quarterback position. And that could be a tough ask. But you want to see some kind of a passing game. And I'll tell you what, we're supposed to see this up-tempo offense. I'm very intrigued to see what it's going to look like, on the field. And that's the whole problem with the up-tempo offense is if they start going 3 and out, you really start wearing out your defense. So, that's going to be, interesting to me, at least to see, how Vanderbilt's, newly fangled West Coast offense is going to look. And, again, you've got 2 new coordinators, coming in for Derrick Mason. We know about Coach Roof, who's got an outstanding reputation, and I think he should be able to cobble together, something different. But I don't know what we're going to get out of Coach Fitch. I don't think he has as much to work with all the opt-outs and everything else. But long story short, want to see something out of the quarterback position. I don't know who the starter is going to be. Everybody seems to think it's going to be Seals. So we'll start with him.
Yeah, it's going to be Seals. The bigger question I have is whether you can count the number of times that he will have 3 seconds to throw on one hand or 2 hands this year.
You're right. He's not going to have that formidable running game where, they can use play action and, teams have to play them honestly. And Mike Elko, the defensive coordinator for A&M, whether it's Seals or anybody else, whether it's Wright, Musa, or Danny Clark, he's going to give them a lot of pre-snap looks and try to confuse them. And in a situation like Saturday, where Vanderbilt hasn't played a game yet, none of these quarterbacks have, that could be a real.
Did you by chance see the depth chart that they put out on Tuesday?
I didn't. I read about it more than I saw it, but I still get a huge kick out of the fact that Grant Miller, whose dad Fred played for the Titans, is one of my favorite players. Somebody I'd go to the locker room and talk politics with. But I saw comments about the depth chart. With all the opt-outs and everything else, I'm sure it was interesting.
Yeah, they kind of pulled a Butch Jones special with that thing, I think.
Oh, okay.
Or was it Kiffin? Remember the year that Tennessee listed like 18 co-starters? Was that Jones or Kiffin?
Yeah. Might have been Kiffin.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's that long ago. But anyway, it was kind of one of those in a way. But next one was the Nashville media's consensus opinion. And this guy wants to know about Mason Stackhouse and Candace Lee. So I'll just let you take those in whichever order you choose.
Candace Lee, I think the jury is still out. She hasn't even been in there long enough. We really haven't played any sports since she's been named athletics director. Derrick Mason, I think everybody likes him. I think he's a good defensive mind, but I think it's probably time. And the program has declined over the last few years. And I just think that, most people in the media, and I can't speak for everybody in the media, probably feel like a change should be in order. Because I think most of us think they're going to go 0-10. Jerry Stackhouse, I got to admit, has not done it conventionally, hasn't recruited conventionally. But I can say one thing. He's a good teacher and he's a good game coach. He's a good bench coach. And they got better last year. And to me, that's really important. So, he's bringing kids in. He's recruiting fairly effectively, it seems like. And we'll see what happens when they reconvene this year.
Nope.
By the way, my dogs are with that as well.
Oh, well, I haven't had a puppy interruption yet, but the show's not over.
We have 4 dogs in here. It's just crazy.
Oh, my. Well, I've got one, and he's enough. He's a 7-month-old, and he is crazy. We love him, but he's crazy.
Yeah.
Let's see. VU Wars says, what do you make of Derrick Mason's career thus far at Vanderbilt? Has he really been hamstrung by Kirkland, et cetera, or is he simply not a great head coach and other folks would have likely gotten more wins with the rosters he's had?
And again, I say this by saying I like Derrick Mason a lot. I think he's a good man. I think he's a good defensive mind. But I also feel like if they start playing the Kirkland card, I think it's a crutch, because when you come to Vanderbilt, you know what the deal is. You know that your facilities are not going to be as good as everybody else's, and that's just the way it is. And James Franklin, managed to make things happen, and Derrick, I think, either didn't feel like he had a strong enough hand to put his foot down, or just decided that he was going to let his athletics director and the powers that be try to improve the facilities. But when Mr. Turner came in as AD, he talked to a lot of people, and the one thing he said is that Derrick Mason needs help. The facilities that he's trying to win with, are the 14th best in the SEC by a long shot. But I didn't like the fact that Derrick was kind of using that as an excuse at the end of last year. I think that's the last vestige of a guy that's about to get fired, to be honest with you. But that's just my opinion.
Well, first of all, Derrick should have pushed a long time ago when he had the hammer,
Yeah.
and he didn't. I look at it this way. I've had this theory for a while that I think the best investment in sports is a great college football head coach. Now, the bad ones get overpaid, but if you find a great one, I mean, the return on investment for an outstanding football coach is way greater. Well, I shouldn't say way greater because I think it's spread out over time on facilities, but I think you can get a ton of bang for your buck with the right football coach. And James Franklin showed what the upside is, even with crap around you.
Yeah. And Franklin was a bull in a china shop. He was. And he alienated a lot of people. But you know what? He had to. Because the old way of doing things, wasn't working. And, I still, almost chuckle when I think of James Franklin and the circumstances that surrounded his arrival. Remember, the Maryland people couldn't wait to get rid of him. And 2 years later, they're on their knees begging him to come back. I mean, it was really kind of funny and kind of ironic, but I don't even know if Vanderbilt knew what they were getting in Franklin. But he was a guy who came here ready to be a head coach, knew, had the playbook and everything else. And I'm talking about media. I'm talking about, recruiting, everything. And the problem with Derrick Mason was he's been learning on the job. He's a good guy. He's almost too good a guy. And I think that, at the end of the day, he's going to make somebody a really good defensive coordinator, whether it's in college or in the NFL. I think he did his best here. They got a few good years out of him, but he made some bad hires. I think we can all say that. And again, I mean, the recruiting is a huge challenge, and sometimes it almost has to be perfect. You almost have to hit on every good kid that you bring in, and for a while that worked for Derrick. I think, to me, the biggest indictment of Mason was last year, where he had three guys who looked like they were going to get drafted by the NFL, and really only one, had a decent year. That to me, if I were the AD, I would have fired him after last year. But his contract probably prevented that. But when you've got three guys, who look like draftable NFL players who wanted to come back and are betting on themselves, Kalijah Lipscomb, didn't work out for him. And, the tight end, had a terrible year. I mean, he basically took him out of the offense. And, really for the most part, to me, last year was a catastrophe based on what it could have been.
Well, as well as I do, when you watch teams and you look from the outside, there's such a disconnect from what things could be from what they are. There's some issue, whether it's chemistry or something else. There was something wrong with that team from the get-go, and I can point to reasons, but there's still something about that team that I cannot put my finger on, and people that I talked to that were close to it couldn't either. That was one of the strangest things I've ever covered.
Oh, I no doubt. But, there were such high hopes, for Vanderbilt last year because, again, very few times did they have, at least in my opinion, the first time in a long time, that many impact players, that many playmakers, and we just never saw it. And I to this day, I don't understand, what happened to them. And, you look now, and, you look back and reflect, they never, quite got the quarterback position right. I mean, Keyshawn Vaughn had a good year. I mean, we know that. So there was no question about that. But Kalijah Lipscomb, had a decent year, but didn't seem to improve. And Jared Pinkney disappeared. I mean, he just absolutely disappeared. And you wonder what those guys were thinking when they got cut from the NFL this year. That, to me, in a situation like that, it's incumbent upon a coaching staff to make those guys better. And I just didn't see that happening, especially for Lipscomb and Pinckney. It just didn't happen. And you'll never convince me otherwise.
D.A. Dor wants to know if you and Kevin Stallings stay in touch to talk baseball or anything else, and if you have any reflections on the period of transition from Kevin to Bryce to Jerry.
Oh, my gosh. I haven't talked to Kevin in over a year, but I root for Jacob, his son, like crazy. In fact, as we're speaking, Jacob last night hit a walk-off home run for the Pirates. We're having a terrible year, but happy he's getting a chance. The transition, Bryce Drew, the first year, it looked pretty good. And Bryce Drew, of course, recruiting the 5-star kids, everybody was excited. But that last year with Bryce Drew was just an absolute train wreck. And to me, for anybody who wanted, to blame injury on what happened, wasn't paying attention. And the transition to Jerry, it was an unconventional hire. I know people who even at the time, still now, don't love the hire. But I'm liking it more today than I did the day that it happened, because I think Jerry wants to stay. He's not using this necessarily as a stepping stone to the NBA or whatever. And I think he's done a good job. I think he did a really good job last year. And to me, it's not always about recruiting. Not enough times do we see, player development and guys improving. And you definitely saw that last year.
Let's see. D.A. Dor also wants to know if you have plans to get back into political talk radio, because he says he might listen.
Probably not. People around here hate my politics. And I try, for the most part, to keep my mouth shut. I feel how I feel. It's funny because people don't know. I'm out there on the left. But all my friends, almost all my best friends, are diehard Republicans and Trump supporters, and we're fine. I mean, life is too short to go to war against your friends. But in these times, I mean, people, it's just crazy. It would be crazy to have a political talk show. And I don't see in this market why they would put a guy on the air, who is of my political stripe. I just don't see it. So I'll stick to sports. I got a better chance there than I do in politics. But tell the guy thank you.
Well, Danby Nash wants to know if you will be back in radio, period, anytime soon.
I hope, but you never know, Chris. There's been some interest. We'll see what happens. And if we consummate a deal, we will enthusiastically put it out there. Believe me, and I can speak for Kevin. We're very proud of the 16 years we spent at the Zone. It was fun. It was an honor. And the day after we got fired, the response on social media blew me away. It did. I just never imagined. And it's really, for the most part, I get something every day in some way, shape, or form. And it's really nice because usually, you get a lot of, negative responses, and we really didn't. But, we're definitely thinking over a few things, and hopefully in the next few weeks or months, something will come together.
Well, I'll say this. It may be one of the biggest compliments I can pay you. In the summer where everybody's mad about something every day, I think that's the angriest I've seen my dad, who's 77, get all summer. When he found out that you and Kevin worked, and I'll tell you what, I was pretty close behind. I just couldn't believe it. I would listen to you guys, and I know what it takes just to be on top of one beat, right? To have to do that with the Predators and the Titans, and you the flagship station at UT, so there's expectations that come with that. Not to mention who those teams are playing. whatever goes on in the NBA and Major League Baseball. I was just floored at how you and Kevin were able to stay on top of everything. And as I get later in life and you have wives and kids and whatever, like it's hard to stay on top of much of anything just with that. I was just blown away with the knowledge you guys brought to the airwaves every day, and I really miss that.
I appreciate it was something I enjoyed doing. And my family can tell you that every day I went to work, I loved my job. I mean, there wasn't a day I dreaded it. I'm very lucky. I've got the best ex-wife in the world because she does all the heavy lifting around here, which allowed me to nerd out and sit in front of a computer and do whatever I had to do my job to the utmost. And, that's important too. But, listen, I was very lucky to be doing something I loved for 16 years. I had 19 years at Channel 5. I hope the party's not over, but if it is, I have no regrets. I didn't feel like I was mailing it in, however management felt about us. But I appreciate the compliment. And, we were both doing something we were passionate about, and we had a blast doing it.
And the question sort of self-destructs before I start, because I don't know that you ever had a typical day. It probably depended on whether the Predators were playing or whatever. But what did your days generally look like the last few years in terms of when did you get up, when did you go to bed, and did you have any time to breathe in between?
My bedtime is a moving target. I was just like obsessed about the show. I'd get up in the middle of the night, get on the computer. Generally, would do the show, would get up at like 5 o'clock. Show started at 6. When the show was over, if I didn't have to, be at a production meeting or whatever, I would take a nap. And then at about 3 o'clock, I would get on the computer and I'd be on there for 3 or 4 hours getting ready for the next day. And then sort of as the night went on, kind of update, what we were going to do the next day and send out, sort of a syllabus of the show to the people I was doing the show with, whether it was Kevin and Frank or Kevin and Blaine, and our producer. And that's, and sprinkle in, calls to my friends, sources, whatever. And if there was a Preds game, I'd go to a Preds game. But to me, it was great. I mean, I couldn't think of a better way to make a living.
Door fan wants to know if sportscasting and sports talk radio had not panned out, what would have been your second career choice?
Man, great question. I'm not sure, Chris. I maybe I would have been in sales. Early on in my career, I was pretty good in sales when I was doing minor league baseball play-by-play. I mean, that was one of the things I really wanted, and it just didn't work out. The other thing, I might have gone to law school. I mean, who knows? My mother wanted me to be a lawyer, but I just got bitten by the broadcasting bug, and I was lucky enough to get a really good job right out of college doing AAA baseball, and it's been a pretty interesting ride since then.
I don't know how you'd have time, but do you have any hobbies outside of the business of sports? I think I heard that.
Yeah, that got a big nope. Gosh, I haven't played golf in like 12 years because my son just didn't like it. So other than kids, really no hobbies.
Another one from Door Fan. In fact, there's a few more from him. What was your most memorable moment on Channel 5 or radio, reporting on something that was the highest of highs or lowest of lows? And he says you cannot answer Vol's national title in football.
That wouldn't have been it. Highest of highs, the Titans winning the AFC Championship, being on the field when when they got the trophy. Seeing Bud Adams, just absolutely speechless. That was pretty cool. Lowest of lows, being on the air when Dale Earnhardt was killed. I was doing that in real time, and it was surreal. I can't imagine anything that's even close to that. But those are the first two things that come to mind.
The Steve McNair story, I think, would have to be in that ballpark too.
Well, I was at a Reds game in Cincinnati with my brother, and we were leaving the game, and we were going to Columbus, and I can't remember for what. I don't know if we were going to go to another game the next day or whatever, but I got a call from Eric Yutzi, and Eric had replaced me at News Channel 5, and he goes, "Do you know what's going on?" I go, "No." And he said, "Steve McNair was murdered." And I'm like, holy crap. And so I went right to the airport and got on a plane and really went right to the radio station and was on the air for, I can't remember how many hours, but yeah, that was crazy just because, I was in a totally, different location out of town and had to figure out a way to get home.
Were you with the Preds when they made the Cup run?
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was unbelievable. I was, how do I put this? I was doing the TV, but not for the last three series because, the networks take over. It was unbelievable. I mean, you could see in the Chicago series when they swept the Blackhawks that something was happening. And when they beat the Blues in 6, and I mean beat them convincingly, you could tell that this was setting up to be something special. And it was just unbelievable. It was, and it's funny to say because, the Titans went to the Super Bowl and that was incredible. But none of that was really in town. As you remember, I mean, the Titans only played the wild card game in Nashville. There was a different kind of excitement. It was social media, but this, with the crowds on Broadway, with the viewing parties, and just how it kept growing and growing. One night Charles Barkley's there, another night Nick Saban's there. I mean, everybody wanted to be in on it. It was just unbelievable. And I think we all look back at that, like you do your first girlfriend or boyfriend or relationship or whatever. I mean, it is something that you'll look back and just, feel warm and fuzzy about the rest of your life until they do it again and hopefully win the cup. But it was so organic, but at the same time, it was so exciting. And there's just something about a city coming together. And like I said, I mean, this was in the age of social media, and this really, I was front and center for the All-Star game, and the All-Star game was really cool for me. I got to anchor an hour special on the Saturday before the All-Star game, and Nashville, for the National Hockey League was sort of the center of the hockey universe, but for the Stanley Cup Final, it was a totally different animal. And it just put Nashville on the map in such a cool way. The draft was sort of the same way too. I mean, you just saw something that made you really proud for your city, and at the same time, just realizing how cool it was to have people in and out of Nashville, really loving your city as much as you did.
When they go into that Chicago series, was there any remote part of you that says, hey, I see a little something here where they could pull a surprise and really take off?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they swept them, I mean, that the Blackhawks were their postseason boogeyman, and they just absolutely steamrolled them, let you know that there was a new sheriff in town. And, Peter Laviolette had won a Stanley Cup, had been to a final with the Flyers, Peter Laviolette's a Hall of Fame coach, and of course Barry Trotz is a Hall of Fame coach too. But Laviolette, this team had a swagger, and you could just see. I mean, there is something to be said for peaking at the right time, and that's exactly what happened with them.
Yeah, but I guess what I was getting at is, did you see that before the first puck dropped in game one, though, at any point, though? Because I didn't remember there being any particular buzz about that team, and I'm not nearly as close to it as you are, but yeah.
They didn't play particularly well at the end of the season. They got in, which is what they wanted, but nobody could see them, just totally gelling like they did. I mean, it was unbelievable, but that is the beauty of sports. The fact that it's so organic and you don't know what's going to happen. And when it does happen and it's your team, it's the best drug. It's the best legal drug available.
Mark, I know Vanderbilt baseball, for the most part, has not been anywhere near the top of the radar in terms of the general sports landscape, although I think that changed, especially over the last couple of years. But everybody in this town in sports media knows and likes, if not loves, Tim Corbin. I know that you have a great respect for him. What was it like watching him build that program, winning it in 2014, and then doing that again in 2019?
I've always said that what Tim Corbin has done at Vanderbilt is the most amazing sports feat that I've seen accomplished, not only in this town, but really in any town. The only person to me that comes close to comparison with Corbin is Pat Summitt, who took the Lady Balls from absolute scratch and built a power, a dynasty. And with Corbin, and Roy Mewburn is a very nice man who did not have the facilities that Tim Corbin did. So when Tim Corbin came in as baseball coach, we all thought, what a personable guy. I mean, he should do better. But he kept doing better and better. And then he started getting the David Prices of the world. And you just saw that the quality of player, kept escalating. And Corbin, I mean, this. Tim is such a unique guy. He knows how to connect with everybody. I mean, Tim Corbin could succeed in any walk of life, in any occupation, because he understands it's about relationships. And he's done that. And the facilities that he's built there are second to none. I mean, I was so happy for him, as so many, in a lot of ways, Tim Corbin's like Terry Crisp. Everybody thinks we're his best friend. And Corbin makes you feel like you're one of his close friends. And I, like many, have a great relationship with Tim, and, text him and all that, and talk to him. I was so happy for him when he won his first national championship, and knew that others would be coming, because you could just see it. He wasn't he wasn't a one-trick pony. He was a guy who was going to sustain his success. But winning the second one, that team was definitely different than the first one. And I think if we reconvene and on this podcast in 10 years, Chris, we'll probably be talking about 3 or 4 more national championships. He's just a special guy. I mean, you can talk about Nick Saban. You can talk about a lot of great coaches. The most interesting thing about Tim Corbin, and the last year of our show, he was on every Friday. And we talked to him about a lot of things other than baseball. Most interesting man in the world. His circle of friends, who he reaches out to talk coaching, to talk leadership. It's fascinating just to sit and listen to him. And I just think he's an extraordinary individual. Vanderbilt is so lucky to have him. I mean, you and I both know he could leave and go anywhere. And let me tell you something. The way Major League managing is now, Tim Corbin could be a Major League manager. I say that without fear of contradiction. That couldn't have happened maybe 10 years ago. But Tim Corbin manages people as well as anybody, and I'm talking about at the major league level. So he is an extraordinary individual, and yeah, I am, like so many, one of his biggest fans.
Yeah, I think the most interesting man in the world comment you made is, I've never heard anybody say it, but I think it's dead on. The thing that I think separates him is, like, a lot of these head coaches, like, that have been hyper successful, Saban and Belichick come to mind. You can understand why they're great at what they do, but there's like a disconnect with the rest of the world in terms of relation and personality. Although Saban's gotten better at it and knows how to do it, you just get the feeling he doesn't want to do it more than he has to. With Tim, there is a genuine component of his personality that I've just never seen in a coach that's been that successful the way that he has it, and I think that's why everybody loves him.
Oh, no doubt. And the relationship he has with his players, it just blows me away. Was it Tyler Brown? As it was the closer, right? And just his story about him getting Tommy John surgery and getting married and all that. And a lot of coaches would have been scared off by that. And Corbin just, kept developing the relationship, stayed in touch with him, and he came to Vanderbilt and had a great career. So stuff like that, the Donnie Everett thing and the way that he has made Donnie's family a part of the Vanderbilt family, and not casually. I mean, it's amazing. Just the energy that he has and his attention to detail and just how great he is at maintaining relationships. A lot of times a player, stops playing for you and he'll come back and you'll be happy to see him and all that. But Corbin is involved in the lives of all of his ex-players. It doesn't matter what they're doing, whether they're in sales or whether they're in the big leagues. And it's just awesome to see that. And I just think he is just such an extraordinary individual. He's wound pretty tight. I mean, maybe not as much as he used to, but he's a really interesting guy.
The Everett thing was the thing that I thought could break him because he carried that burden around every day. It was never far from him. But at the same time, he leaned into it. He never shied away from it. I don't think anybody... Yeah, if you could write a handbook for that, I don't think anybody could have written it better than he did because he was able to embrace that enough to where it really cut him to his soul. But at the same time, the grace with which he handled it, I don't think anyone could have handled it better than he did.
Oh, and Chris, I mean, that team was shattered. I mean, we always think back to Hank Gathers, the guy from Loyola Marymount, who died on the court. And Loyola Marymount goes on to go, deep into the NCAA tournament to the Elite Eight, I think. And you wondered if Vanderbilt would do that, circle the wagon. But they were so shattered. I mean, you remember that regional. They got destroyed. I mean, they lost, like 15-1 or whatever the score was. I mean, that team and that coach were both shattered by that. And it took them a long time. I mean, more than a year, to at least cope, to at least sort of maybe not put it behind them, but, not have it, just totally, drag them down.
Yeah, if people don't remember, I believe they had swept Xavier by a 26-3 score earlier in the year, and I believe 15-1 was the final. Kyle Wright was the guy that I think took the beating in that one, but those kids hadn't slept. I mean, there was no chance, and I think that was a team that I look back on, and I looked at this for a couple hours this summer, went back and looked at that team. That 2016 team was better than any of us realized at the time, and I would not have been shocked if that team had gone back and made a deep run to Omaha. Instead, we know what happened there, and I really think that just destroyed the next 2 years of their program after that. They hung on enough to get back to a regional, but I just think that set them back for 3 years in a way I've never seen a program set back in the way that was.
And you know what? A lot of people, yeah, a lot of people might look at that and view that as sort of a weakness. And to me, that only showed the humanity of Corbin and just how hard he took it. And, it showed. I mean, it took him a while, before, he could figure out how to totally cope with it. And, yeah, it was really a very, very tragic, but also a pretty illuminating process.
Yeah, I have been really happy for him at 3 times. The first was 11 when they got to Omaha, and they got that out of the way. The second time was 14 when they won it in a year that I don't think people saw that coming, because that got another burden off his back. I think that those were great for him, but I think they also, and I don't know how to articulate this, but it was almost like the removal of that burden was greater than the joy. I think when they won it last year, I saw a joy in him that I have never sensed. And I think it also removed a burden, but I've never seen him just sit back and soak in the moment the way that he did in 2019. And I think that's why, of all the things he's done, I was happiest for him after that, as compared to anything else that he's ever done.
Yeah, and he had Donnie's parents down in the field with him when they were celebrating. And, once again, he just always does the right thing.
Last question, I'll let you go after this. Dorfan wants you to name your 3 bucket list sporting events. And I'll be surprised if there's anything left that you haven't checked off at this point, but that's a great question to end this with.
Wow. I still haven't made it down to a Masters, believe it or not. It just hasn't happened. Gosh, the others, I've been to a Kentucky Derby. I've been to a Stanley Cup final. I've been to a Super Bowl, a World Series. Wow. Army-Navy game. That is supposed to be, pretty neat. I can't think of a number 3. I'm sorry.
Have you done a World Cup?
No, I haven't done a World Cup.
Well, there you go. You're welcome. Last question from me. I just thought of this. What's the strangest thing that you've ever covered? Strangest sporting event or whatever?
The Vanderbilt tennis ball game.
Oh yeah.
I still get asked about it. And the funny thing is, Frank Cornett, who was crying after the game, I don't have to retell the story for Vanderbilt fans, luckily. But Frank Cornett was in tears after the game. And I hadn't seen him in forever. And I remember, thinking about, gosh, the last time I talked to him was the tennis ball game. That was the strangest thing I've ever seen. Because C.M. Newton did, I'm not kidding you when I'm saying this. C.M. Newton did some of his best coaching in that game to get it to overtime. He Dean Smithed it in terms of using his timeouts and free throws and everything else. And I thought he was masterful. And it all got obscured because of a tennis ball thrown by, well, some of us think we know who it is.
Yeah, I think there's a few that think they know who that is. And I think what was salt in the wound in that game was it was Dwayne Shensis, who was like probably the villain of college basketball at the time.
Yep, worst mullet I've ever seen.
No doubt about it. Well, with that, I'll let you go. I've kept you long enough. Mark, this has been so enjoyable. I appreciate you joining us. Tell people where they can follow along with you on Twitter or wherever else you are these days. I'm rooting for you to make an emergence somewhere. I'm sure it'll happen. But where can people follow you on Twitter or wherever you are talking about things these days?
On Twitter, M. Howard Sports.
All right. Mark, thank you so much. He's Mark Howard. I'm Chris Lee. Yeah, you bet. He's Mark Howard. I'm Chris Lee. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast.